Hey guys, tonight we're not chasing knights or unraveling royal plots, we're stepping into the real, split-screen lives of two people in medieval Europe. You're either shivering in a damp, creaky hut, your breath fogging in the icy dawn, or lounging in a feather bed, a servant fanning your fire. One life grinds you with hunger, the other drowns you in power. Spoiler, you probably won't survive either for long. Ready to dive deeper. How do feudal rules trap you in endless work for the Lord? Can you imagine surviving a peasant's hunger or a king's luxury? What keeps your spirit strong when everything's falling apart? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and what time it is. I love seeing where these tales land. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake, and the world feels like it's trying to smother you. Your straw mattress is damp, half mold, reeking like it's plotting your demise. You're a peasant, and your back groans as you shift, a dull pain like someone's grinding a rock into your spine. The air's sharp enough to bite your nose, and your breath clouds above, mocking your fireless hearth. A drip-plip-plip from the leaky roof hits a tin bowl, a cruel clock ticking toward another day of survival. You share this lumpy bed with your wife, 2 kids, and something skittering rat or unlucky squirrel. You don't check, it's warm, and that's a win. Your hut's one room, dirt floor, no privacy. A smoky hearth, a wobbly board table, cloth scraps nailed over the window to fend off the wind. Your tunic, rough as a bad breakup, hangs on a peg. It's your only one, patched so much it's more thread than wool. You pull it on, tie a rope around your waist, your belt broke last summer, and step into the cold. Bare feet hit the ground. Shoes are a distant memory. Historians still argue whether peasants went barefoot, more from poverty or practicality. Your numb toes don't care. You splash gray water from a bucket onto your face, the same slosh used to rinse yesterday's bowl. Soaps for lords, made from lion fat, and your wife's hands blistered last time she tried it. Quirky fact, some peasants swore garlic kept fleas away. It didn't. You grab a barley bread crust, hard as regret, and dip it in water to save your teeth. It tastes like despair with a side of grit. Outside, the village stirs. Edric's axe thuds, a grim heartbeat. You nod, he grunts. Words are for folks with energy. Your first task is firewood, no fire, no warmth, no food, no lice-free clothes. You grab a dull hatchet, trudge to the woodpile. Cutting trees in the Lord's forest is illegal, but everyone snags branches. Pray the steward's asleep. Mud clings to your feet like a clingy X, and you slip, muttering a curse. Joke 1 if peasants had Yelp. This forest would get 1 star for all mud. No mercy. Feudal rules are your jailer. You owe the Lord days of unpaid labor corvée before you touch your own plot. Taxes and tithes take your grain, even in bad harvests. That thread, your will, is literal in your tunic's patches, symbolic in your grit. It's fraying, and you wonder how long it'll hold. Joke 2. Your tunic's so patched, it's practically a quilt with ambitions. A mainstream fact, medieval peasants worked 2 to 5 days a week for their lord, often leaving their fields to wither. What's next in this relentless grind? And can you keep that thread from snapping? You're not in the muddy hut anymore. Your calloused feet spared the frost for now. Instead, you wake slowly, not because you're tired, but because you can. You're a king, draped in silk sheets that slide against your skin like a whisper. The air carries the faint sweetness of cedar from a fire tended all night by a servant whose name you've never bothered to learn. Your bed, vast as a small village, is stuffed with goose down, each feather plucked by hands trained for the task. The room glows softly, stained glass filtering dawn into blues and reds that pool on the stone floor. No drip of rain, no mildew stench, just warmth, quiet, and the weight of power settling over you like a velvet cloak. You stretch, and the day begins, not with labor, but with ritual. A gentle knock, then another, and the door creaks open. A valet glides in, head bowed, carrying a pitcher of rose-scented water, warmed just so. Another servant follows with a robe, heated by the fire to chase away any chill. A third holds a towel. A fourth your slippers, each moves like a gear in a silent clock. You don't rise alone. You're lifted into the day by hands that exist only to serve. A mainstream fact, medieval kings were often dressed by attendants, their morning routines a performance of divine order, reinforcing their status. You swing your legs over the bed, and before your feet touch the floor, slippers slide into place. Joke one if your morning prep takes less than a dozen people. Are you even royalty? You sit, and the valet pours water into a silver basin. You dip your hands, the rose oil slick and fragrant, and pat your face dry with a linen towel softer than anything you've ever touched. A servant combs your hair, another trims your beard, a third applies balm to your hands, almond oil, because goose fat is so last century. You glance into a polished silver mirror, catching your reflection. Not bad, though maybe a touch pale. Your doublet, embroidered with gold thread, waits on a stand, a long side hose dyed a deep green and a cloak lined with ermine. These aren't just clothes, they're statements, dyed with woad and saffron, colors that scream wealth louder than any herald. A quirky tidbit saffron was so costly. A single ounce could buy a horse your cloak's trim could feed a village for a year. The room hums with protocol. Who enters first? Who speaks? Who touches your garments? It's all scripted. A dance of hierarchy. Historians still argue whether such rituals were about control or genuine reverence for the king's divine right either way. You're the center of it. You stand, and the cloak is draped over your shoulders, its weight a reminder of the crown you'll wear later. A servant adjusts it, ensuring not a speck of dust dares settle. You move to the solar, a sunlit room where breakfast waits, its scent curling through the air, fresh manchet bread, honeyed figs, spiced sausages, poached eggs sprinkled with herbs from the castle garden. A food taster samples each dish because poison is a real buzzkill. You sit, a lute player plucking softly in the corner, and take a sip of wine from a goblet etched with your crest. It's barely dawn, and you're already living a life most can't dream of. But power isn't just velvet and figs, it's decisions, endless and heavy. A steward knocks, bowing low, and delivers the morning briefing trouble on the northern border. A bishop's letter, a noble's request for a new mill. You wave it off later. For now, you chew a slice of pear poached in cinnamon. Its sweetness forgettable, but expected. Your life is a performance, every bite and gesture watched by attendants who gauge your mood. Joke two if you frown at the sausage. Someone's probably getting exiled by noon. You listen to the lute, half hearing the steward murmur about grain stores. Outside, bells toll the hour, their chime distant, untroubling. The world beyond these walls feels like someone else's problem. Yet, even here. The thread from that peasant's hut follows you, not the patched tunic, but the invisible one tying you to the realm. Your power rests on their labor, their grain, their obedience. That thread, your authority, is strong but stretched, pulled taut by every decision you delay. You don't think about the peasants directly. Why would you but their fields fuel your feasts, their taxes gild your halls? A mainstream fact, medieval kings relied on feudal levies, where peasants provided not just crops but soldiers, binding the realm's survival to its lowest rung. You lean back, the chair carved with your family's crest, and stroke your greyhound's ears. It's pampered, its fur glossier than most villagers' dreams. Your morning isn't free, though. After breakfast, you'll meet advisors, hear petitions, maybe sign a decree. Every choice ripples approve that mill, and a noble grows loyal, ignore the border, and a baron might rebel. A quirky tidbit: some kings kept astrologers to pick lucky days for decisions, because even divine rulers hedged their bets. You're not just a man, you're a symbol, and symbols don't get to yawn and hit snooze. The servants clear the plates, their steps a quiet rhythm, and you rise, robe trailing. The solar's warmth lingers, but duty calls, and you step toward the great hall, where the real work begins. This life feels effortless, but it's not. You're watched as closely as any peasant, not by stewards, but by courtiers, bishops, and rivals waiting for a misstep. Your thread of authority could fray if you falter a bad harvest, a lost war, a whispered heresy. Joke 3: your crown's so heavy, it's a workout just to nod. Historians still argue whether medieval kings felt trapped by their role or reveled in its grandeur. Do you feel the cage yet? You pause at the hall's threshold, the weight of your cloak suddenly noticeable. The day's just started, and already you're balancing a kingdom on that thread. How does it feel to rule? And what happens when the peasant's labor meets your commands? You're back in the mud, far from the king's fancy world. Your feet sink into cold, sloppy ground, each step reminding you of your peasant life. The sun's barely up, but you're walking a mile to the Lord's fields, shoulders hunched, hands stuffed in your sleeves for warmth. The air smells like frost and animal poop, and your patched tunic held together by that tough thread of your will scratches your skin. Today's job is spreading manure, as fun as it sounds. You grab a shovel, its handle smooth from years of use, and start tossing muck onto frozen dirt. The smell makes your eyes water, so you breathe through your mouth to avoid gagging. This is your life working for free on the Lord's land while your own tiny plot waits. The Lord's rules keep you stuck. You owe days of unpaid work called corvée before you can farm your own land. A real fact: peasants often gave 2 to 5 days a week to their lord, leaving their own fields to die. Your hands get sore, your back hurts, but you keep shoveling. The reeve, the Lord's bossy overseer, rides by on a horse, his boots shiny while your knees are covered in dirt. He doesn't nod. You don't expect it. Complaining isn't safe talk back, and you might get fined, whipped, or worse. You've seen folks lose their land for less? Joke 1: if you got a coin for every shovel of poop, you'd still be too broke for shoes. The field goes on forever, rows of dirt waiting for your sweat to grow crops. You're not alone. Other peasants work nearby, their faces as tired as yours. Nobody chats. You save your breath for work. Your stomach rumbles, but lunch is hours off. Just a hard piece of barley bread and a garlic clove in a cloth. You'll eat it later, sitting on a rock, while the reeve watches to make sure you don't goof off. A weird fact: some peasants thought eating a spider could fix a fever. Good luck finding one in this mess. You wipe sweat off your face, smearing mud instead, and keep going. That thread, your strength, like the patches on your tunic, holds tight, but each shovel swing tests it. This work isn't just hard, it's how you stay alive. Your small plot, rented from the Lord, needs care, but his fields come first. If your crops fail, you still owe the church 1/10 of your harvest. The priest eats, you go hungry. You also pay fees for using the Lord's mill, oven, or even boiling water. Historians still wonder if peasants hated the system or just thought it was God's plan. Do you feel angry or just bone-tired? You slip in the mud, your knee hitting the ground, and grumble quietly. Nobody hears, or they act like they don't. The others keep working, their own threads wearing thin. By noon, your hands are raw, your legs shaky. You pee behind a tree, using leaves because that's all you've got. The reeve rides by again, his horse splashing mud on you. Joke 2: if mud was gold, you'd outshine the king by lunch. You don't laugh, you're too worn out. The sun's up, pale and cold, giving no heat. You think of your kids, coughing by the fire, and your wife, spinning wool for a bit of cheese. They're why you push on, why that thread hasn't broken. You dig the shovel into the dirt again, the rhythm as harsh as your hunger. This work doesn't help you. The Lord's fields will feed his feasts, his soldiers, his castle. You might get a nod, maybe some bad grain if he's nice. Your own plot, if you get to it, might grow enough barley for winter if frost doesn't kill it. A true fact by the 1200s, many used a 3-field system, rotating crops to keep dirt healthy, but peasants rarely got the benefits. You pause, leaning on your shovel, and look at the horizon. The castle sits far off, where the king you've never met makes choices that keep you here. Your thread connects to him. His power comes from your work. You finish a row, hands burning, and start another. The reeve's gone, but you feel him watching. You think of the forest, where you'll sneak later for firewood, risking a fine. Every choice is a risk work. Eat, live, or don't. Joke 3, your life's like a bad game show, spin the wheel. Get hunger or a beating. A strange fact, some peasants carved symbols on tools for luck. Your shovel's plain, but you hold it like it matters. The day's not over, and neither are you. But the thread's getting thin. What's waiting at home? And can you find something to eat? You step out of the muddy fields, the shovel's weight still lingering in your hands, and into the grand hall of the king's castle. No more muck for now. You're wrapped in the king's world, where power smells like polished wood and fresh herbs scattered to mask the sweat of crowded bodies. You sit in a high-backed chair, not quite a throne, but close enough. Your fingers heavy with jeweled rings, a goblet of wine etched with your crest in your hand. Remember that thread from your peasant's tunic, patched and fraying. Here, it's invisible, woven into the authority that holds this room together, but it's just as stretched, pulled tight by every eye watching you. The hall's tall windows spill colored light across stone floors, and courtiers in velvet robes hover like bees, their whispers buzzing with ambition. Your day as king is work, but not the kind that blisters your hands. You're here to judge, to decide, to be the realm's anchor. A scribe stands ready with a scroll, ink-stained fingers trembling slightly. The steward, bowing low, presents the first issue. A noble family wants to build a new mill. You sip your wine, letting advisors argue over water rights and taxes. You'll decide later, when they've tired themselves out. A real fact, medieval kings often held court to settle disputes, their presence alone shaping outcomes. As their word was law, you nod occasionally, half listening, your mind drifting to the hunting party planned for later. Joke 1, if your advisors talk any longer, you'll knight the table for endurance. Next, a merchant guild complains about bandits on the trade roads. Taxes are too high, they say, and the woods are unsafe. You raise an eyebrow, bandits are a problem, but so's an empty treasury. You murmur, send a patrol, but only after the harvest. The scribe scribbles, and the room shifts, every courtier noting your tone. A weird fact, some kings hired royal champions to fight bandits. Basically medieval bouncers with swords. Your power isn't just in decrees, it's in being seen, a symbol of order. Historians still wonder if kings felt trapped by this role or loved the spotlight. Do you feel the weight of every stare? A messenger bursts in, breathless, from the northern border. The barons late with his levies, and peasants there are refusing to work. You lean forward, wine forgotten. Soldiers, but only if the grain's in. You say. The room hums with approval, or maybe fear. Your decisions ripple, ignore the border, and rebellion brews, push too hard, and you lose loyalty. That thread of authority, like the peasant's thread of grit, frays with every choice. You wave the messenger off and turn to a priest clutching a sealed letter. It's from the bishop, warning of a preacher stirring trouble in the south. You sigh heresy's a headache for the Inquisition. Not you. You mutter, let them handle it, and the priest scurries away. The court jester cartwheels in, Tossing a bad joke about a goose and a bishop, you smirk, and the room erupts in forced laughter, because no one laughs until you do. Joke to your jester's so bad, he makes the bandits look talented. A minstrel strums a ballad, but you're distracted, thinking of the border, the mill, the bishop's letter. You're not digging ditches, but this is labor mental, political, endless. A true fact kings balanced nobles, church, and merchants, their power vast but never absolute, as a single misstep could spark revolt. You sign a scroll, your seal pressed into hot wax, and the scribe bows. It's a small act, but it binds the realm, or so they tell you. Petitions from commoners come next. A farmer with a broken fence, a baker arguing with a brewer over grain prices. You listen for a moment, then wave them away. Let the reeves sort it, you say, already picturing the hunt. The courtiers nod, but you catch a flicker of judgment in their eyes. Your thread's strength depends on their loyalty, and you wonder who's whispering behind your back. A quirky fact, some kings kept pet ravens, believing they warned of betrayal. Your greyhound, lounging by your feet, just snores. You rise, robe trailing, and head to your chamber to review letters, one to a French cousin, another to the Pope, a third to a mistress in a border town. You dictate, the scribe writes, turning your grunts into poetry. The hall empties, but the work doesn't stop. You're a warlord, a banker, a priest, all at once, keeping nobles happy and peasants quiet. Joke 3, your job's so tough. Even your crown needs a day off. That thread of power ties you to the peasant's labor. His muck feeds your feasts. His taxes gild your walls. You don't see him, but he's there, in every loaf, every coin. You pause, quill in hand, and glance out the window. The castle's shadow stretches toward the fields where he toils. What's it like to rule over his sweat, and how do you stomach the cost? You're back in the peasant's world. The castle's glow a faint memory. The sun's low, casting long shadows as you trudge home from the Lord's fields, your hands still stinging from the shovel. Your hut looms ahead, its thatch sagging like it's as tired as you are. Inside, the air's thick with smoke and the faint sourness of unwashed wool. You slump by the hearth, where embers sulk from last night's fire. Your wife stirs a clay pot, and your kids huddle close, their coughs cutting through the quiet. You're starving, and the meal waiting is all you've got to keep that thread your patched tunic, your stubborn will from snapping. You grab a wooden bowl, chipped at the edge, and wait for whatever's in that pot. It's pottage, as always, a lumpy mix of barley, water, and a sad turnip chunk. No recipe, just whatever you could scrape together, boiled until it's mush. You ladle it in, the steam barely warming your hands. A crust of barley bread, hard as a brick, sits on the board you call a table. You dip it in the pottage to soften it, because your teeth can't take another crack. A true fact, peasants ate about 1,500 to 2,000 calories a day, mostly from bread and pottage, barely enough to fuel their endless work. It tastes like grit and regret, with a hint of ash from the fire. Joke 1, if this pottage had a Yelp review, it'd get 1 star for keeps you alive. Barely. You chew slowly, not because you're savoring it, but because there's nothing else. Your kids eat with both hands, too hungry to care about manners. Your wife sips weak ale from a cracked cup, safer than the stream water that killed a neighbor's kid last year. No milk, your cows long gone, and the village dairies for the Lord. A weird fact, some peasants added ground acorns to bread when grain ran low, which sounds like a desperate granola bar experiment. You tear off another piece of bread, its texture like chewing a sponge full of sand. Historians still wonder if peasants saw meals as fuel or a rare comfort. Do you feel anything but hunger? The hearth's glow is weak, and you poke the embers, hoping for a spark. Your wife mutters about the baby's fever, her voice low so the kids don't hear. You nod, helpless. and pass her the bowl. Meat's a dream maybe once a month, a fatty scrap from the tanner, boiled with roots to fake a feast. The pig you had was slaughtered for the Lord's tax, its bones long gone. Eggs. Your chickens stopped laying when winter hit. You trade leeks for butter sometimes, but not today. The pottage is all there is, and it's running low. You tell your son to eat slow, stretching the illusion of enough. This meal's no celebration. It's a pause in the grind. You eat in near silence. The only sound's the crackle of the fire and your daughter's cough. The church says to thank God for food, so you mumble a prayer, more habit than faith. That thread of yours, the one holding your tunic and your spirit together, feels thinner here, with every empty spoonful. You glance at the wooden saint on the wall, its carved eyes blank. You don't know its name, but you hope it's listening. Joke too, if saints ate pottage, they'd probably quit the miracle business. Outside, your neighbor Edric's rooster crows. Late as usual, you think of his chickens, wishing you had one. Food doesn't travel far. Everything's from a day's walk, grown in your plot or bartered in the village. Spices, those are for kings. You flavor with thyme or mustard leaf when you can. But salt's rare, and you're out. A real fact, medieval peasants relied on local crops like barley and rye, with wheat bread a luxury for the rich. Your wife clears the bowl, saving the pot scraps for tomorrow. You wipe your hands on your tunic, adding another smudge to its patchwork history. This meal's work, too. Your wife's hands, red and cracked, stirred and kneaded all day. Your daughter helped, scraping the pot while dodging the fire's sparks. You eat to survive, not to enjoy, and the hunger never really leaves. You think of the king, his table piled with things you've never seen: figs, white bread, meat that isn't stringy. His thread, his power, is fed by your labor, your grain, your taxes. You don't hate him. You don't have the energy. You just wish for a full bowl, just once. Joke 3, your stomach so empty, it's writing complaint letters to the Lord. The fire dies, and the cold creeps in. You pull your tunic tighter. Its patches a map of your survival. That thread's still there, holding you together, but it's stretched tight, like your hope. You stand, bones creaking, and glance at your family. They're why you keep going, even when the pottage runs out. What's on the king's table tonight? And how does it compare to your empty bowl? You leave the smoky hut behind, your empty bowl still echoing in your gut, and step into the king's solar. A room so bright it feels like the sun's been bribed. Tall windows spill light across hand-woven rugs from some far-off land, and the air's thick with the scent of sweet wood smoke and roasted meat. You sit at a long table, silver platters gleaming under linen napkins, your every move watched by silent attendants. That thread of power, the one tying you to the peasant's labor. Hums here your feast is built on their sweat, and every bite is a show of your crown's might. A lute player strums softly, and a food taster samples each dish, because even kings can't trust their supper. The table groans with food, soft white bread called manchet, sliced thin, poached eggs dusted with herbs, spiced venison sausages that smell like a spice merchant's dream. There's a bowl of figs, shipped from lands you've never seen. Their insides a sticky purple red. Honeycomb drips onto cheese so creamy it melts on your tongue. A true fact, medieval royal feasts used exotic ingredients like saffron and nutmeg, costing more than a peasant's yearly wages to flaunt wealth. You take a small bite of a pear poached in cinnamon, its sweetness sharp but forgettable. You eat slowly, not out of hunger, but because the court expects the performance. Joke 1, if you finish your plate, the jester might faint from shock. A servant pours wine from Aquitaine into a goblet studded with stones, its glow catching the light. You sip, barely tasting it, while another offers watered wine in case you change your mind. The dishes are silver or gilded ceramic, each knife polished to reflect your face. A weird fact, some kings ate whale meat on fasting days, since the church counted it as fish medieval loopholes at their finest. You pick at a pastry stuffed with minced apples and cherries, its crust flaking under your touch. The steward reads the day's agenda petitions, border disputes, grain shortages, but you half listen, chewing as the lute's tune drifts. Historians still wonder if kings savored these meals or just endured them as part of the job. Do you taste the food or just the power? This feast isn't about filling your stomach, it's theater. Every dish screams status, from the venison to the violet garnished trout. Spices, worth more than gold, are your currency of dominance. A roasted partridge lands before you, and you take a bite, then push it away. It's overdone, and you're not in the mood. The attendants whisk it off, no questions asked. The peasant's pottage, gritty and gray, feels like another world, but it's his barley that baked your bread, his taxes that bought your figs. Your thread of authority rests on his hunger, and you don't even blink at the thought. Joke 2, your table's so fancy. Even the crumbs have a title. The meal stretches on, course after course. A pie arrives, and when it's cut, live birds flutter out, startling a courtier into spilling his wine. The room laughs, and you smirk, because that's what kings do. An edible castle made of pastry follows, a nod to your fortress of power. You nibble, but your stomach's already full, your physicians whispering about balancing your humors. Too much meat could heat your blood, they say. A true fact, medieval doctors followed the four-humor theory, advising kings to eat for health, not pleasure, to avoid diseases like gout. You wave off the next dish, a signal the feast is done. Servants clear the table in perfect rhythm, a towel scented with rosewater offered for your fingers. The minstrel shifts to a slower tune, and you lean back, watching dust dance in the sunbeams. Your greyhound pads over, resting its head on your slipper, and you stroke its glossy fur. The court watches, gauging your mood. Did you like the trout? Was the pie too much? Your every gesture is a script they read. That thread, your divine right, holds this room together, but it's heavy, weighed by their expectations. You think of the peasant, his bowl scraped clean, his kids coughing by a dying fire. You don't know him, but his labor feeds this excess. A quirky fact, some kings sent leftover feast food to the poor, though it often went to servants instead. The solar empties, but the show never stops. You'll meet nobles later, sign decrees, maybe hunt. Every act reinforces your rule, every bite a reminder of the gap between you and the mud. Joke 3, your feast so grand, it's practically a second job to chew. You rise, robes sweeping the floor, and glance at the tapestry of your grandfather slaying a boar. It's a lie, but a good one. Your thread's strong, but it's tangled in the lives of those who toil for you. What's it like to wear the clothes of power, and how do they fit compared to the peasant's rags? You're back in the peasant's world, the king's feast a fading dream as you stand in your hut's dim light, the hearth's embers barely holding off the chill. Your hands, still raw from shoveling muck, fumble with your tunic, that same rough, patched rag you've worn for years, held together by the thread of your endurance. It's morning again, and you pull it on, its coarse wool scratching your skin like an old grudge. The air smells of damp straw and yesterday's pottage, and your bare feet hit the dirt floor, cold as the Lord's mercy. You tie a rope around your waist, the belt long gone, and step outside, where frost crunches underfoot. That thread, literal in your tunic stitches and symbolic in your will, is all that keeps you moving. Your tunic's a map of your life, faded brown, stained with smoke and earth, patched with scraps from your wife's old dress. One sleeve's frayed, the other mended with clumsy stitches. You don't own a wardrobe, just this one garment, maybe a torn linen shirt for warmer days, but it's too cold for that now. A true fact, medieval peasants often owned just one or two pieces of clothing, wearing them until they fell apart, unlike the rich with their tailored layers. You step into woolen hose, sagging at the knees, tied with twine to keep them up. Shoes. You've got wooden clogs, hard and unforgiving, but better than frozen toes. Joke 1, your clogs are so clunky. They're basically medieval flip-flops with attitude. You glance at your wife, tying her own worn dress, a wimple covering her hair for warmth and modesty. Your kids wear hand-me-downs, so patched they look like walking quilts. The baby's swaddled in rags, a hole in one already sprouting another patch. You brush something off your sleeve, probably a louse, because fleas and lice are your uninvited guests. A weird fact, some peasants believed sleeping with a live chicken kept lice away, which sounds like a bad roommate deal. You don't try it, you've got enough to carry. Historians still wonder if peasants cared about their ragged clothes or just accepted them as part of life. Do you notice the itch or just the cold? Getting dressed isn't about looking good, it's about surviving the day. Your tunic's holes let in the wind, but it's better than nothing. You hang it on a nail at night. No closet, no drawer, just a chest if you're lucky. The Lord's rules, sumptuary laws say you can't wear fancy colors like purple or gold. Not that you could afford them. Your clothes are mud-colored, anonymous, like you. You tie the neckline shut with twine, your wife's fingers quick despite the cold. There's no mirror, no need. You know what you look like, tired, dirty, alive. That thread of yours, the one holding your tunic, and your hope feels thinner in the dawn's gray light. Outside, the village wakes, Edric's rooster crowing late again. You nod to a neighbor, who grunts back, both of you too worn for words. Your clogs slip in the mud, and you curse quietly, joke too if you fall. The mud might claim you as its new tenant. You're headed to mend a fence today, another unpaid task for the Lord. But first, you check the woodpile. Firewood's life, and you're always running low. You think of the king, his velvet robes warmed by servants, his boots never touching mud. His thread of power is sewn with gold, but it's tied to your labor, your taxes, your patched rags. You don't resent him. You're too busy staying warm. Your wife calls you back for a scrap of bread before you go. You chew it standing, its grit familiar. The tunic's weight, light as it is, feels heavy with the day ahead. A true fact clothing production was grueling peasants spun their own wool, while lords bought silk from distant traders. Your wife's hands, cracked from spinning. Prove it. You pull the tunic tighter, its patches a badge of survival. A quirky fact, some peasants dyed their clothes with onion skins for a faint yellow, but yours is too far gone for that. You step out again, the cold biting your bare ankles. Joke 3, your tunic's so old, it's got more stories than the village storyteller. This is your armor, this threadbare rag, against a world that doesn't care if you freeze. You think of your kids, their tiny patched tunics, and your wife, her dress as worn as your hope. They're why you keep pulling it on, day after day. The castle's far off, but its shadow falls here, in the taxes you pay, the labor you owe. Your thread's stretched, but it holds, just like your tunic's seams. What's it like to wear the king's fine clothes? And how do they compare to your patched rags? You're no longer tugging on a ragged tunic, the peasant's muddy world fading as you step into the king's chambers, where even the air feels expensive. The room glows with firelight, cedar logs crackling in a hearth that never goes cold. You stand, not shivering, but poised, as servants swarm like quiet ants, their hands moving with practiced grace. Your thread, that invisible line of authority from the peasant's fields to this polished hall, holds firm, woven into every stitch of your clothing. A valet lays out your garments, each piece warmed by the fire so no chill dares touch your skin. You're about to be dressed not just for comfort, but for power, a walking symbol of a kingdom built on the backs of those toiling in the mud. It starts with a linen shirt, so soft it feels like a cloud, bleached white and scented with lavender tucked among its folds. A true fact, only nobles could afford such fine linen, spun from flax grown by peasants and woven by skilled hands. Over it, snug woolen hose in deep blue, dyed with costly woad, cover your legs from ankle to thigh. A doublet follows, padded and tailored, buttoned with polished horn discs. Buttons aren't just practical, they're a flex. Proof of craftsmanship no peasant could dream of. You stand still as a servant fastens them, each click a reminder of your status. Joke 1, if your doublet takes less than an hour to button, you're probably just a duke. Next comes the cloak. Heavy velvet dyed a rich burgundy, lined with ermine fur that costs more than a village's harvest. It drapes over your shoulders, trailing slightly, and a servant adjusts it to avoid the floor's dust. Your boots, soft leather shaped to your feet, have never seen mud. A silk sash, embroidered with your house's crest, ties around your waist silk from far-off lands, carried by merchants who risk their lives for your wardrobe. A weird fact, some kings wore sashes with hidden pockets for relics, like a saint's bone, for luck. You glance at the silver mirror. Your reflection is a portrait of wealth, every thread screaming royalty. A page slips a ring onto your finger, its stone catching the firelight. Jewelry isn't just pretty. It's a signal, a reminder that your body is sacred, elevated. The final touch is a circlet, not a full crown, but enough to make the room bow. Historians still wonder if kings felt empowered by these layers or just weighed down by expectation. Do you feel like a ruler or a mannequin? The servants step back, their eyes low, and you move to the hall, robe whispering against the stone. Every step is a performance, your clothes shouting what your voice doesn't need to. You are the king. The courtiers watch, their own fine clothes paling next to yours. They discuss the weather, a visiting noble, grain prices background noise to your presence. You nod, and the room shifts, their whispers adjusting to your mood. Your thread of power, unlike the peasants' fraying patches, is gold, but it's heavy, tied to their loyalty and the labor of those you'll never meet. You think of that peasant, his tunic a patchwork of survival, held together by stitches and grit. Your cloak cost more than his life, yet his fields feed your table. Joke 2, your wardrobe's so pricey, it could ransom a knight or at least his horse. Getting dressed is a ritual, not a choice. You don't pick your clothes, they pick you, each piece a brick in the wall between you and the world. A true fact, sumptuary laws banned peasants from wearing colors like your blue hose, reserving them for nobility to keep the classes clear. A servant brushes a speck off your cloak, though you didn't see it. Another offers a scented cloth for your hands, because even cleanliness is a show. A quirky fact, some kings had their clothes blessed by priests, as if God cared about their tailor. You step into the hall, the crowd parting like water, their eyes on your gold-threaded doublet. Your clothes aren't just fabric, they're armor, shielding you from doubt, from rebellion, from being ordinary. You feel their weight, not just on your shoulders, but in the stares of those who bow. That thread, your divine right, binds you to the crown, but it's tangled in the lives of those who weave your linen, grow your food, pay your taxes. You glance out a window, the fields distant but ever present. The peasant's rags and your velvet are two sides of the same kingdom, both stitched by hands you'll never shake. Joke 3, your cloak's so grand, it probably has its own squire. What's it like to find joy in a world of mud, and how does it compare to your gilded pleasures? You slip from the king's velvet glow into the peasant's muddy world, the castle's shimmer fading as you stand in your village square, mud clinging to your clogs. The sun's low, painting the sky a bruised purple, and the air smells of damp earth and wood smoke. It's a rare festival day, St. Martin's, maybe, and the village buzzes with something close to joy. Your patched tunic, that thread of endurance holding it together, feels lighter for once, as if the day's pause lets your spirit breathe. You're not working the Lord's fields today. Instead, you're here, surrounded by neighbors, their faces less grim under the flicker of a bonfire. Laughter and song rise, a brief escape from the hunger that never leaves. The square's alive with makeshift fun. Kids chase a limping goose in a game of catch the goose, their giggles sharp against the crackle of flames. Someone juggles turnips, dropping one into the mud, and the crowd roars. You clutch a cup of weak ale, sour and cloudy, brewed in a barrel that's never been cleaned. It's not much, but it dulls the ache in your bones. A true fact, medieval peasants found joy in festivals tied to the church calendar, like St. Martin's Day, where they could eat, drink, and dance without the Lord's shadow. You sip, the ale's bitterness familiar, and join a chant about a local farmer outwitting a fox. Joke one, this ale's so weak, it's basically water with a grudge. A neighbor strums a crude lute, the notes wobbly but welcome. You don't know books' readings for monks, but stories flow like the ale. An old man spins a tale of a saint tricking a demon, his voice rising and falling, hands waving for effect. You listen, forgetting the empty pottage bowl for a moment. A weird fact, some peasants told stories of talking animals who cheated the devil, blending faith with folklore to cope with life's grind. You clap when he finishes, your hands rough against each other. Historians still wonder if these moments of joy were rebellion against hardship or just survival's thin veneer. Do you laugh to forget, or because you can, the bonfire spits, sparks, and you step closer, its warmth a rare treat. Your wife dances barefoot with a neighbor's daughter, her patched dress swirling. Your kids dart through the crowd, chasing a kid with a stick painted like a dragon. You smile, a rare pull at your lips, and take another sip. The church blesses these days, but the priest's nowhere in sight, probably sipping better ale at the manor. You trade a leek from your plot for a hunk of cheese, a small victory. The festival's food is better than usual, a roasted pig's head. Eyes replaced with onions, carried high like a trophy. You get a sliver, greasy and rich, and savor it like it's the king's venison. These moments are fleeting, gone by dawn when the muck waits. You've danced in the dirt, sung songs you'll forget, maybe fallen asleep under a tree with leaves in your hair. Joke two, you dance so hard the mud's jealous of your moves. A traveling juggler passes through, swallowing fire, and you watch, mesmerized, though you've got no coin to toss. The crowd's alive, shouting, clapping, a brief bubble of life against the grind. Your thread, that stubborn will, feels stronger here, stitched tighter by shared laughter and a full stomach, even if just for tonight. But joy's not free. The Lord takes a cut of the festival's food, his reeve eyeing the pig like it's his. You owe work tomorrow, and the church expects a tithe, feast or no feast. A true fact, festivals like these were often taxed, with lords claiming a share of the meat or ale as their right. You push the thought away, joining a circle to sing about a drunk knight who fell in a ditch. The words are rude, the tune off-key, but it's yours. Your neighbor Edric, 3 cups deep, tells a joke so bad you laugh at his effort, not the punchline. That thread of yours, patched like your tunic, holds you to this moment, this village, these people. As the fire dies, you feel the cold creep back. Your kids huddle close, their faces smudged with ash and glee. You think of the king, his feasts endless, his music polished, his joy staged, his thread of power buys him pleasures. But yours, born of dirt and defiance, feels alive tonight. Joke 3, your festival's so wild, even the goose is demanding a holiday. You take one last sip of ale, the cup empty too soon. The night's fading, but the memory of this laughter lingers. What's it like to chase the king's pleasures? And do they match the spark of your muddy joy? You trade the village square's fading firelight for the king's curated world, stepping into a manicured garden where even the air feels polished. The scent of clipped rosemary and lavender brushes your nose, and a fountain imported from some Italian city murmurs in the background. You're the king, your velvet cloak trailing as you stroll, hawks perched on gloved fists, hounds bounding ahead. The thread of your power, spun from the peasant's labor, hums here, binding every orchestrated pleasure to your command. This isn't joy for joy's sake. It's a stage, and you're the star, performing wealth and control to keep the court in awe. Your morning might start with music, a minstrel plucking a lute in the solar, the notes crafted to flatter your mood. You listen, half bored, waving him off when the tune grows stale. A true fact, medieval kings employed professional minstrels, often traveling across kingdoms, their performances a status symbol as much as entertainment. You move to a chessboard, its ivory pieces gleaming, and face a noble who's more interested in losing gracefully than winning. You take his knight, and he smiles. Nobody beats the king unless you let them. Joke 1, your chess game so rigged, even the pawns bow before moving. By afternoon, you're on horseback, a leather doublet swapped for your cloak, leading a hunt through the royal forest. Horns blare, peasants beat the brush to drive deer toward you, their shouts distant but essential. You loose an arrow, and whether it hits or misses, the court calls it a great shot. The hunt's not about food, it's theater, showing your dominion over land and beast. A weird fact, some kings used hunts to scout loyal knights, turning sport into politics. You dismount, a servant handing you wine, and watch the hounds tear into a stag. Historians still wonder if kings hunted for thrill or just to flex power. Do you feel the rush, or just the weight of their eyes? Back at the castle, a feast follows. Because why not? Roasted boar, dressed in its own skin, sits beside game birds dripping with spiced sauce. You eat sparingly, the court watching every bite. A jester tumbles in, juggling apples. His joke sharp but safe insult the wrong lord, and he's out of a job. You smirk, and the room laughs. On cue? A true fact, court jesters could gain favor, even land, if their wit pleased the king. But one bad joke risked exile. You lean back, sipping mead, while a poet recites a tale of your grandfather's victories, half of it made up. Your greyhound lounges at your feet, its fur shinier than a peasant's dreams. Later, you might watch a play, actors from Paris or Prague performing betrayal or honor, themes as old as your crown. You clap, not because you care, but because it's expected. The court's a carousel of entertainment music, games, stories, all designed to fill the silence of your power. A quirky fact, some kings kept trained bears for shows, because nothing says I'm in charge like a dancing bear. You wander to the garden again, its topiaries sculpted to mimic your crest. It's beautiful, but it bores you. That thread of authority, golden and heavy, buys you every pleasure, yet leaves you wanting something real. You think of the peasants' festival, their muddy dances and off-key songs. Their joy, raw and fleeting, feels distant but sharp, born from scraps of time they steal from hunger. Your pleasures are endless, but they're scripted, every laugh a line in a play you didn't write. Joke 2, your feasts are so grand. Even the leftovers have a guest list. Your thread ties you to the peasant's labor, his barley in your bread, his taxes in your wine, but you don't see him, only the shadow of his fields. The court watches, waiting for your next move, your next mood. Do you chase these pleasures to feel alive, or to drown the boredom? As evening falls, you listen to a clerk read from a book, some knightly romance or dry theology. You nod, half asleep, the words blending into the fire's crackle. The day's pleasures pile up, but they blur, each one less thrilling than the last. You retire to your chamber, servants trailing to prepare your bath. The peasant's thread, patched and gritty, holds his joy in rare bursts. Yours, gilded and smooth, feels like a chain. Joke 3, your life's so fun, even your boredom needs a crown. You glance out at the darkening forest, where the peasant's fire has long gone out. What's it like to pray in a world of mud, and does it reach the same sky as your gilded faith? You slide from the king's polished pleasures into the peasant's dim world, where faith is as much a part of life as mud. You stand in your hut, the air heavy with smoke, and the faint whiff of mildew from your straw mattress. Dawn's gray light seeps through the cloth-covered window, and you cross yourself before reaching for your patched tunic, that thread of endurance still holding its seams and your spirit together. You're headed to church, a cold stone building where the priest's voice echoes in a language you don't understand. Your faith isn't a choice. It's the rhythm of your days, like the drip of rain or the ache in your back, tying you to something bigger than the Lord's fields. You trudge to the village chapel, your clogs slipping on icy paths. Inside, the air's as chilly as outside. No fire, just candles flickering on a rough altar. You kneel on the hard floor, your wife and kids beside you, their coughs muffled to avoid the priest's glare. He chants in Latin, words like a song you've never learned but always known. You nod, stand, sit, say amen on cue, more habit than understanding. A true fact, medieval peasants attended church weekly, their lives shaped by the church calendar's feast days and fasts. You mumble the Lord's Prayer, half the words meaningless, but their weight feels holy. Joke 1, if Latin's the language of God, you're definitely praying on mute. Faith isn't just the priest's sermons, it's in the charms you carry, the fears you bury. You've got a bone in your pouch, maybe from a saint's relic, maybe just a sheep, either way. It's for luck. Your wife hangs dried herbs over the cradle to ward off fever, and your neighbor buries nails at his field's edge to keep spirits away. A weird fact, some peasants believe tying a toad to a sick child's bed could cure illness. Nobody asked the toad's opinion. You light a candle at the chapel, its wax dripping like your hope, and pray to a saint whose name you forget, Bridget. Jude, someone for fevers. Historians still wonder if peasants' faith was pure devotion or tangled with superstition. Do you believe because you must, or because it keeps the dark at bay? The church tells you when to eat, when to fast, when to mourn. Fridays mean no meat. Lent means less of everything. Feast days, like St. Martin's, bring a rare bite of pork, but today's just kneeling and cold. The priest, with his shoes and fat goose, speaks of sin like he's never lied for bread. You listen, thinking of your kids' coughs, the cow that won't milk, the frost killing your barley. You blame God, the weather, yourself, never the Lord, because that's too risky. Your thread, patched like your tunic, ties you to this faith, to these rituals, to a God who might not hear. You leave a leak at the altar, all you can spare, and shuffle out, the priest's voice fading. Outside, the village stirs. Edric's rooster late again. You think of the king, praying in a marble chapel with gold-crusted books. His faith is a show, a deal with bishops to keep his crown steady. Yours is raw, mixed with fear of miasma, bad air that kills and stories of demons in the woods. A true fact, the church collected tithes, 1/10 of your crops, even in famine, feeding priests while you starved. You clutch a wooden cross, its edges worn smooth, and whisper a prayer for your sick kid. Joke 2, your cross is so old, it's probably prayed for you first. Your faith shapes the seasons. Midsummer's Eve means fires to scare spirits. Candlemas means candles for new beginnings. You've jumped over flames, tossed salt into ashes, whispered things you deny by daylight. A woman outside the village, half herbalist, half witch, once gave you nettles for your kid's fever. It worked. Or maybe it was luck. You don't ask, you just pray. That thread of belief, like your tunic's stitches, holds you together when hunger and cold don't. You think of the king, his relics and cushioned pews, his thread of divine right glinting gold. Yours is rougher, but it's yours, sewn into every mumbled prayer. You head home, the chapel's echo in your ears. Your wife's already spinning wool, her hands red, her eyes on the cradle. You don't talk about the fever, but it's there, like the mud on your clogs. Joke 3, your prayers are so loud, even the saints need earplugs. Your faith, muddy and desperate, connects you to the king's, though his is dressed in silk. Both of you kneel, but under different roofs. What's it like to face death in mud or marble? And does it care about your thread? You drift from the peasant's cold chapel to the king's grand crypt. But now you're neither just a soul facing the end, whether in straw or silk. Death doesn't care about your title or your tunic. It comes for both, quiet and certain. If you're the peasant, you're in your hut, lying on that moldy mattress, your breath short, hand shaking. If you're the king, you're in a gilded chamber, surrounded by physicians and priests. But the end feels the same. That thread, your endurance, your power phrased to nothing now, its patches or gold irrelevant. You're fading, and the world keeps turning, indifferent to the legacy you leave. As a peasant, you feel it coming. Your back's too weak to haul wood. Your cough deeper than your kids. You sit more, hide the tremble in your hands, and let your son fetch the bucket. The midwife brings bitter root tea. It tastes like dirt and does nothing. The priest visits, his candle flickering, and asks for your confession. You mumble sins stole a branch from the Lord's forest, cursed the reeve once because that's what you do. A true fact medieval peasant life expectancy hovered around 35, dragged down by child deaths and disease. Though some reached 50. Your family gathers, quiet, their eyes heavy. You try to say something, a joke, a lesson, but your voice cracks. Joke 1, you're so sick. Even the lice are packing up. Your hut's dim, the hearth cold. Your wife weeps into her sleeve, and you wish you'd fixed that fence. No doctor, no medicine, just herbs and prayers. A weird fact, some peasants believed a dead cat under the floor kept death away. You didn't try it, but you're tempted. Historians still wonder if peasants face death with peace or fear. Do you feel ready, or just tired? They bury you behind the church, a wooden cross if there's time to carve one. The priest's Latin fades, and your legacy is small. A patched roof, a rake, a son who ties kindling well. Nobody writes your name, but the fields you worked keep growing. As the king, your death is a spectacle. Your chamber becomes a stage, shutters closed, relics, saints' teeth, true cross splinters piled around you. Physicians whisper about humors. One suggests bleeding, another a prayer. You clutch a gold crucifix, its weight familiar, and confess sins you barely remember. A true fact, royal deaths were rituals, with coronations mirrored by anointing for the dying, marking the end of divine rule. Scribes jot down your last words, or something poetic enough to pass. Your court watches, nobles plotting, your thread of power unraveling as they eye the throne. Joke 2, your death so grand, even the angels need tickets. Your body's washed, maybe embalmed, your heart buried separately in some crypt. The funerals of parade priests, candles, choirs, a coffin draped in velvet, bells toll across the land, and mourners some paid weep as your name echoes. A quirky fact, some kings' bones were boiled to move them cleanly, because even death had logistics. Your tomb's marble, carved with Latin, your sword beside you. But succession's messy sons fight, bastards rise, and your decrees fade. Historians still argue if kings were mourned for love or duty, do you think they'll remember you, or just your crown? Both of you, peasant and king, end under earth or stone. The peasant's grave grows grass. The king's crypt gathers dust. Your thread, whether grit or gold, dissolves. But what you built lingers a fence, a law, a child's song. Joke 3 deaths, the only lord who doesn't tax you. You're gone, but the world spins on, indifferent. What endures when your name fades, and what echoes louder than your grave. You're drifting now, the weight of mud and marble easing away. Let your breath slow, each inhale soft as a whisper, each exhale carrying the day's burdens into the dark. The peasant's patched tunic, the king's velvet cloak. They're just threads in a story that's fading, like a fire burning low. Close your eyes, feel the hum of your fan, the quiet of your room wrapping you gently. Did you catch that bit about the cat under the floor, or the king's boiled bones? Maybe you smiled at the thought of a peasant's fence outlasting a royal decree. These tales, rough and gilded, blend into a soft hum, a reminder that all things, huts, castles, lives settle into silence. Let the fields and crypts blur, the thread of their stories unwinding into dreams. Sleep now, cradled by the night's calm, and let tomorrow wait.